Hi YouTube, Darth here. This is Yes or No, a weapon review series where I give a clear and concise answer as to what weapons you should be using in Battlefield 4. Today's weapon is the M240 Bravo, a 7.62mm light machine gun for the support class. It complements the lighter M249 in the United States arsenal and brings major stopping power to the battlefield, both real and simulated. But how does it measure up in Battlefield 4? Should you be using the M240B? Yes or no? Yes. The M240B is probably the best flanking weapon in the game, but it has a very narrow parameter of usage. It's essentially a fire-belching bulldozer and has about the same limitations, being defined both by its strengths and weaknesses. Let's talk about the strengths now. At a minimum time to kill of 279 milliseconds, the M240B is the fastest killing of the support LMGs and easily in the top tier of all the automatic weapons. The M240B has the ability to topple scores of enemies in very short order. Combined with its rate of fire of 650 rounds per minute, the 7.62mm damage model gives it the best opportunity for cutting enemies in half. Leading the charge of that massive DPS is the 7.62 damage model, which gives the M240B a maximum damage of 33 and a minimum of 21.6, meaning that a headshot and a body shot is enough to kill on normal or just a headshot on hardcore. It has a modest fall off, requiring only 4 body shots to kill all the way out to 48 meters. Like many of the LMGs, the M240B has a comparatively low first shot recoil multiplier of just 1.4 times. This means that every time you start shooting the weapon, its first bullet out of the barrel is going to kick 1.4 times as much as every sequential round. This is important because tap fire is what makes or breaks the M240B, and you'll need to be able to control your weapon when starting and stopping bursts. Those are the primary benefits of the weapon. It's essentially a bulldozer for enemies. Not a lot of reach or range there, but it has the ability to just mop up hordes in CQB. Compared to the other heavy-hitting LMGs, it pays a heavy price for that upfront power. Now I'll talk about that heavy toll. The M240B has the second worst side-to-side recoil in the game at 0.42 degrees left and 0.42 degrees right. The upwards recoil is not much more forgiving at 0.48 degrees per shot. The M240B's combined recoil is the highest in the game, just barely edging out the SR2 PDW. Hold that trigger down for more than a few bullets and you're going to be in RNG territory in no time. But wait, there's more. If you thought that was bad, the spread increase per shot of the M240B is just as bad at 0.112 degrees of added deviation per shot. This, combined with the recoil pattern, turns the M240B into a mess in as little as 3 bullets at 10 meters or 2 bullets at 15. Keep in mind, by the way, that this weapon requires 2 to 4 bullets to kill an enemy on normal, so you can see how this is going to be a major weakness. You're not going to get a whole ton of help with the spread decrease from the M240B at just 8 degrees per second. This means the M240B doesn't recover fully until many frames after firing has ceased. It isn't the worst rate in the game, but it's pretty close. Don't spray hard and this won't burn you too hard, but it is something to be aware of. The non-altered hipfire spread of the M240B is really quite wide. This isn't specific to this weapon, but the LMGs tend to have poor hipfire save the L86A1. Just keep in mind that putting a laser on this weapon is pretty much the only way to get reliable spreads when you're in close quarters, that or burying your weapon in the enemy. So there it is. Your bulldozer dumps ammo at close range and pretty much you're going to be shooting into emptiness at longer ranges. The M240B is essentially the theoretical opposite of the spectrum from the M60E4. Where the M60E4 is about long-range accuracy with power, the M240B is all about short-range killing power with severely crippled long-range capability. If you're curious, the PKP actually sits between these two, but let's take a look at the numbers. When I'm getting a feel for the statistics behind these weapons, and particularly when I'm looking at how I should vote on weapons in this series, I look at the math behind the guns. In the case of the M240B, it's a clear loser against the PKP and M60E4 at range, though it does beat out the much vaunted AWS. Oddly enough, despite the AWS's attractive time to kill, its accuracy combined with its lower damage model puts it well behind the heavy hitters. At ranges closer than 10 meters, the M240B continues to win as you can roughly examine the raw time to kill information at that range. A low time to kill generally translates almost directly into effectiveness at extreme close distance. And really, the M240B has to win at less than 10 meters as this is where the weapon is at its most effective. Almost every bullet is guaranteed to land at that range as long as you aren't holding the trigger down. Just remember to pause between kills and you'll do wonders. Let's talk about some more control techniques. The M240B, like the Bulldog, desperately wants to leave your clutches the longer you fire it. With a recoil of 0.48 up, 0.42 left, and 0.42 right, after a few rounds you might as well be firing a punt gun at your target. The first shot recoil multiplier is a much more manageable 1.4 times, so after a small skip at the beginning, your general pattern is going to be a V shape as the gun continues to fire. To counter this upwards recoil, you'll merely need to pull straight down. I think this might actually make the M240B quite the attractive contender when playing with a controller. However, you'll notice that the spread per shot increase combined with the left-right deviation turn this weapon into a mess in short order. As this is a 7.62mm weapon, you'll want to fire the gun in bursts of roughly 4 to 5 shots up to about 15 meters. Beyond that number of shots and beyond that range, this weapon becomes extremely unreliable. But there is one more technique to deal with this. For ranges beyond CQB, you'll need to microburst the M240B. Firing bursts of 1 to 3 rounds at a time with a frame or two to rest will help offset the massive deviation this weapon brings. This is really the only way you're going to down targets at range, and it's going to require weapon discipline to make happen. Thankfully, the M240B doesn't fight back much, unlike the Bulldog, as its recoil multiplier is quite tame by comparison. Make no mistake, the M240B is your flanker's weapon. This weapon wants to be silent and be on close quarters maps with lots and lots of enemies, particularly if they can be caught unawares by players running smart routes. You've got enough ammo to literally kill 25 enemies, and although you'll probably only be grabbing packs of 3 or so at a time, this hunting the flanks is a good mentality to have with the M240B. And though the M240B has quite a bit of ability to slice enemies in half, facing them heads up is not exactly a desirable exchange. Your hipfire ability is not particularly great, and the M240B does best when you have the opportunity to draw on the enemy first. This weapon, again, lends itself to the flank in this respect. In general, if you find yourself caught in the open at range, you're going to want to find cover. If there's none available, you're going to need to practice your micro-bursting skills against the enemy. They've already got a likely advantage against you, so you'll need to get every bullet you can on target. In reality, you should be striving to avoid situations like this, which is why I tended to run with a lot of smoke grenades with the M240B. I find that smoke was a great way to get between cover and to disappear myself from situations where the M240B didn't have the upper hand. As for secondaries, you could consider running a more long-range oriented secondary like the Magnums. In reality, I found that situations where I might have to switch to a secondary just called for more precise work with the M240B. And as with all the box-fed LMGs, be sure to cover your lengthy reloads. The M240B reloads pretty slowly, and you'll need time to get back in the fight. Taking a look at the popular attachments for the M240B from the top players via BF4stats.com, I found that there was a bit of a spread. There were obviously players that preferred to match the raw DPS of the M240B with a bipod, those that attempted to tame the recoil stats, and some chose the same route I'm going to give you. So what did I end up using? For my optic, I oscillated between using the Coyote and the Hollow 1X sight. Most of the time I didn't find the optic helped one way or another, as the range of the M240B is relatively short, and it's really the player's behavior while aiming down sights that contributed more to the victory. Additionally, the low recoil multiplier on the M240B also opens up the potential for higher magnification scopes, so use whatever you're comfortable with here. The accessory that I slapped on the M240B was the laser sight. I don't really think this is optional for this weapon. The hipfire isn't particularly great, and you'll need some help if you get caught unprepared for an enemy. There are still plenty of weapons that beat the M240B straight up, and that leads into why my barrel attachment is important. For the barrel, this weapon will perform the best with the suppressor. It plays well to the weapon's bulldozer-like strength close up. You can try slapping a compensator on here to get better range performance, but you'll still just have a poor man's M68 range. No, you want to run the M240B in stealth mode and get into positions where you can bulldoze the entire enemy team. For that, accept no substitutes but the suppressor. Finally, for the underbarrel, I preferred the stubby grip. For the insane amount of spread that the M240B has, paying the penalty of slightly worsened spread decrease was well worth it. You take that high spread increase and shave it down to 0.0896 degrees per shot, something more akin to the AR-160 Naked. You'll not get nearly as much value out of the angle grip for reducing the negligible recoil multiplier, and you could make a case for the vertical grip or ergo grips, but again, I really don't recommend crutching on the hipfire of the M240B. For a long time, the M240B was my most used weapon in Battlefield 4. I had fallen out of favor with it as I moved away from the support class to the assault and engineer classes, and this video let me reconnect a bit with this old friend. At first I was really underwhelmed by its terrible range performance, but I had to re-examine its strengths. It's a silent bulldozer in close quarters, and that's where it's meant to shine. A train wreck for the whole enemy team if it goes unnoticed. So a definite yes. If you find yourself liking the M240B, I highly recommend the M60E4, another weapon I reviewed on this series some weeks back. It's got much better range performance at the cost of a bit of upfront damage. If you want to blend between the two, the PKP is also quite adept. I find it gets a bit lost between the two weapons, but it's still quite competent in its own right. A bit faster close-up than the M60E4 and a bit more efficacious at range than the M240B. That's it for this episode of Yes or No. If there's something you think I missed, or if you have a particularly different take on the M240B, please let me know in the comments below. If there's a weapon you'd like to see reviewed on this series, leave a comment indicating which weapon. Because you keep asking, yes, I will be continuing this series in Battlefield 1 when it releases in mid-October. Also, if you like what you saw, please be sure to force choke the like button. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, YouTube.